Good morning and welcome to the National Transport Commission webinar on dangerous goods. My name is Michelle and I'll be your webinar moderator. Today you will hear from Debra Kirk and Matt Arkell from the NTC about updates to the Australian Dangerous Goods Code after an extensive consultation with industry. Like always, we'd love to hear from you during today's presentation. If you have a question, please feel free to type in your questions in the Q&A section at the bottom of your screen during the session. Today's webinar will be recorded and uploaded to the NatRoad website and the YouTube channel. So welcome, Debra and Matt, and over to you.
Thank you, Michelle. Thank you to NatRoad for organising this webinar, and thank you to everyone who is attending. During today's webinar, I'll take you through the background of the ADG Code review, how to navigate the C-RIA or the Consultation Regulatory Impact Statement, how to navigate the draft code. After that, I'll hand over to Matt, who will take you through the key changes and next steps. We'll then go through your questions. As Michelle said, if you haven't already submitted questions or you think of new ones as we go through, please pop them in the chat. Okay, so why is this comprehensive review happening? In 2020, the NTC released an issues paper examining the legal framework for the land transport of dangerous goods. Many of the submissions we received highlighted that the problems were more with the code itself rather than the legal framework. Stakeholders identified that the land mode provisions of the code had not been comprehensively reviewed for 15 years and that there were significant gaps in the provisions. It was also believed that the benefits envisaged with the move from ADG 6 to ADG 7 had not been fully realised. So in November 2020, the Infrastructure and Transport Ministers meeting, ITM, endorsed the NTC's recommendation to conduct a full review of the code. Thanks, Matt. So what's the scope? Specifically, the scope of the review has been to incorporate ADR and RID concepts. For those who are unfamiliar with ADR, ADR is the Agreement for the International Transport of Dangerous Goods by Land, and RID is its equivalent for rail. So the scope of review was we have based the structure of the draft code on the ADR. Where possible, we've used provisions from the ADR have been used as a model for our own, but at no stage was replacing the ADG code with the ADR or becoming a contracting part of the ADR ever considered. It's never been in scope. What we wanted to do in this review, what we wanted to achieve was to update and address issues with the current code, particularly identifying and correcting translation errors, updating outdated chapters from older editions of the code, and incorporating the requirements for Class 1. For those of you who have any involvement with Class 1, you'll know that they are regulated, or the requirements are specified in the Australian Explosives Code, the AEC, and that hasn't been updated for a very, very long time. So we're going to incorporate those requirements into the ADG code so it's more comprehensive. So where are we up to? Since January 2023, the NTC has released 12 topic-specific discussion papers. These included a total of over 300 questions. We received around 140 submissions from 51 different people or organisations. All parts of the code, other than Part 1, which is your general provisions, were released during this time. In some cases, we circled back and addressed topics multiple times. We've now consolidated all of the comments we received and amended and redrafted some provisions in response. A Consultation Regulatory Impact Statement, C-RIA, has now been prepared and is scheduled to be published on our website today, along with a complete draft of the code. Consultation will be open until 10 December 2024. We expect there will need to be some adjustments made to the draft code in response to the consultation, spit it out, Debra, but the overall shape of the consultation draft should be as close to finished. The C-RIA includes a few outstanding matters that we need your input on. Ultimately, we need to produce a code that meets the needs of all participants, those who need to comply with it, those who need to administer and enforce it, and those who need to maintain it to keep it current. We can only do that if we have input from a broad range of stakeholders. When the final code is approved by ministers, we intend to make it available in both PDF and in a web format, which we hope will support more effective identification of requirements and therefore compliance. So, navigating the C-RIAs. The C-RIAs is primarily an explanatory document for the draft of the code. It explains why we've undertaken this process, what we've considered in developing the draft code, and an analysis of the changes that we're proposing to make. It also contains specific questions that we're seeking additional information on. The structure of the C-RIAs is it's in 6 chapters. The first 3 of these chapters simply provide all of the background information. They give you an introduction to what the problem is, why do we need to do something, and the minister's direction for us. Chapter 4 looks at the options we explored for reviewing the code. They include things like do nothing, which was not an option, adopt the ADR, follow the same process we did for the last 2 comprehensive reviews, or what we have done is this process of aligning to the ADR but not adopting it. Chapter 5 works on the fact that we selected that option to go the way we have, and it gives you what that looks like. It provides an outcome of the draft code, what's been considered, what changes have been made, the structure of it. So chapter 5 is an important one for you. Likewise is chapter 6. Chapter 6 has an analysis, or it has the start of analysis of the costs and benefits. And this is where we really need your help. There are some costs and benefits that we can only get from industry. So there are a number of questions in there that we need you to help with. Likewise, the series has 7 attachments. There'll be links to each of them in the series itself, but they'll also be published individually on our website. Like with the chapters in the series, the first 3 attachments, A to C, provide background information on how the process for reviewing the code was determined. Attachment E provides a summary of the consultation comments we received to the 12 discussion papers and how these have been considered in the draft of the code. The attachments that will be of most interest to you are Attachment D, that's the complete draft of the code. Attachment F, which provides a comprehensive list of the changes. And Attachment G, which is the dangerous goods list in Excel. We've provided that in Excel because it may help you to focus in on the things that matter to you. If you do certain UN numbers, you'll be able to focus in on that, and then you'll be able to see what has changed for you. Navigating the draft code itself. We've prepared a short video to help with navigating the code and focusing in on the parts that will be of most importance to different stakeholders.
Right. At the National Transport Commission, we are working on the first comprehensive review of the Australian Dangerous Goods Code, or the Code, since 2007. The Code is a big document, so reviewing it is a big task. Now we're asking for your feedback to ensure our review delivers a new code that works for everyone involved in the transport of dangerous goods. Let's take a look at each part of the code so you can identify the areas that relate to you. Part 1 of the code applies to everyone along the transport supply chain. It includes general exemptions and concessions, definitions and administrative requirements, and items that could not previously be found in the code. Part 2 of the code looks at classifying dangerous goods. While classification hasn't changed, we have introduced classification codes to assist in understanding the hazards of specific dangerous goods for transport. Part 3, 4 and 5 will be important to any consignors or packers of dangerous goods. Part 3 includes the dangerous goods list and special provisions, and Parts 4 and 5 contain information on packing dangerous goods and preparing them for transport. Also in Part 5 and in Part 7 is information for transport companies and anyone who loads dangerous goods onto vehicles to be transported. Part 7 specifically relates to loading, segregation and stowage. Next, Part 8 is everything that applies to the crew of the vehicle transporting the dangerous goods. there are 2 extra parts of the code you might be interested in. If you design or construct packagings, tanks or other containment systems, then Part 6 will have the information you need. And if you design or manage special vehicles used for dangerous goods, like tank vehicles, then Part 9 is where you'll find these details. To help you provide feedback, we've created the dangerous goods list as a spreadsheet. This will allow you to filter to the areas that are relevant to you. This list now has an extra column that will help consignors to communicate to carriers and drivers the specific information they need to do their jobs safely and successfully. We're working hard to complete our review of the code, but it is a collaborative effort that requires your help. To have your say, head to our website at ntc.gov.au. At the National Transport...
Back to you, Deborah.
Thank you, Matt. So, as you've just seen, the biggest change to the code is the structure and flow of information. The contents of the code now provide better alignment with the transport process. This will make navigating the code and identifying the requirements applicable to the task being performed considerably easier than it is with the current code. This diagram provides an overview of the core parts of the code and their relationship to the main steps in the transport chain. As you can see, each step is relying on and implementing information from the preceding step. I'm not going to go through each one of these. It was highlighted through the video, but on our website will be a copy of this. I call it a wiggly one, but this process, and you'll be able to see that structure of it. The next two, this has parts 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 7, and 8. You'll see we're actually missing parts 6 and 9 here. So if we just go to the next slide, you'll see part 6 and 9 of the code contain the design, construction, performance, and approval requirements for containment types and vehicles. These requirements support the other parts of the code. So unless you're doing those things, you probably don't need to look at them. I will now hand over to Matt to go through some of the key changes for you.
Thanks very much, Deborah. Okay, so what are some of the changes that will result from what we're doing here? So I'll quickly run through some of the bigger things, and these are fairly broad brush, but when you dig into the code itself, you'll get a better feel for it. So terminology. What we're doing here is there's a few changes to things like shall and should instead of must and may. They mean the same thing. It's just a terminological thing. We're moving away from the term carrier. We're moving away from the term prime contractor and transport to carrier and carriage. Probably the bigger change there is dropping prime contractor for carrier. We're aware that that's long caused challenges, and that terminological change makes it clear that we're talking about anyone who's carrying dangerous goods. It's not just a single prime contractor. It also avoids confusion with the heavy vehicle national law, where that term is also used. We're dropping the Australian concept of a placardable unit. That was created for ADG 7, and it has caused some challenges with regulation and with the way that the code is constructed. So that is going. EIPs are becoming a vehicle requirement specifically. We are proposing to remove the requirement to have EIPs on IBCs, but we're not removing the requirement that they appear on vehicles that are transporting IBCs. And there's a bunch of changes to land mode specific provisions. So we're working on introducing special provisions that provide concessions for lower risk consignments and loads. This is in recognition of the fact that certain dangerous goods don't require the same level of controls as other higher hazard dangerous goods, and those dangerous goods are then subject to significant concessions. In some cases, the dangerous goods are subject to such significant concessions that they are effectively treated as not dangerous goods for transport. These are things like not requiring transport documents, not requiring all of those complex things that make transporting what are honestly some quite low hazard materials quite onerous. And we're also working on including much clearer special provisions for the carriage of packages, dangerous goods in bulk, dangerous goods in tanks, and how dangerous goods are loaded, unloaded, and handled, and also the operation of vehicles. So this is going to be a significant benefit to transporters. It allows consignors to clearly communicate with transporters what the conditions are that particular dangerous goods need to be transported under. It prevents requiring transport companies to do all of the heavy lifting for understanding what the dangerous goods is that they're transporting, and therefore implementing those controls. One of the examples that we've used throughout this process is there are currently requirements for transporting certain dangerous goods in closed vehicles. And unfortunately, the place where you will find that is in packing instructions, which most transport companies don't normally have to deal with. That's something that consignors should be aware of. What we do by following the structure of ADR is pulling those requirements out into a much more transparent place. So ultimately, probably the best way to think about this is that we are not changing the underlying way that transport happens. The way that I've tried to explain it is if you transport dangerous goods now, and if you transport dangerous goods in the future, your life is not going to change all that much. The way that dangerous goods are classified, the packages that they're put in, the way that they're marked and labeled, with the exception of IBCs, the way that vehicles are placarded and the look and feel of placards and the segregation rules that we have, all of those things don't really change. So the look and feel of transport day to day should feel much the same. It's the underlying basis that changes. So one of the more significant things that you'll note when you read the new code is that we've tried to pull all of the concessions and all of the exemptions that apply across the code to a wide range of things. They've been pulled together into part 1 of the code. It's probably not of particular importance for people in this webinar, but by way of example, we are trying to pull exemptions for non-dangerous goods transporters into a clear statement at the start of the code. One of the things that will probably be more notable to people, again, it's not actually that great of a leap, but it will take a little bit of getting used to, is we've removed the concept of a placard load and have replaced it with a small load. The reason why we've dropped the term placard load is because there are more things that apply to a less than placard load than just placarding. It's a series of concessions that apply as a result of the fact that the load is small. So we've provided a much simpler way of describing the concession compared to the current method. At the moment, you need to go to chapter 5.3, you need to read through a table. It's a bit complex. Now, very early on in the code, you find a description of what the thresholds are for particular dangerous goods. You identify what the lowest threshold is on the vehicle, and that is the placard threshold for the load. So then, immediately after that, you get a much clearer description of what concessions are that apply, when they apply, and they're all collected together in one location. We've also made clear that transport in tanks, in bulk containers, in multiple element gas containers, and tube vehicles are simply not eligible for these rules. Much as at present, where a tank vehicle is always a placard load, that's true under the new code as well. So another change that we are trying to achieve with this code is transparency. There is a number of requirements that apply to the transport of dangerous goods that are found in the regulations. Those are things like transport emergency response planning, a bunch of administrative matters like tank and packaging approvals and what you need to do in order to achieve one of those, and some frankly quite detailed technical matters that are only found in the regulation. If you drive a tank vehicle transporting flammable liquids, for instance, there's a requirement that you're not allowed to smoke in that vehicle. Unfortunately, the only place you'll find that rule is in the regulation itself. It's not found in the ADG code. So what we've done there is we've tried to pull a lot of those detailed technical requirements into the code itself, and that way we can leave the regulation for the actual legal basis for the code itself. There's also been a build-up of determinations by competent authorities over the years, and we've tried to incorporate those that we've been able to identify and incorporate those into the code itself. Again, it's about providing transparency for the transport industry. Another change that is likely to be of interest to the transport industry generally is the concept of a dangerous goods safety advisor. So this is a requirement that comes from ADR. In ADR countries, it is mandatory. And we're seeking input on whether it should be mandatory in our code, but we're aware that that is not a straightforward process. Essentially, what does a dangerous goods safety advisor do? A dangerous goods safety advisor is somebody who advises a business on how to transport dangerous goods in a safe and compliant manner. It doesn't necessarily need to be a person within the company. That's certainly an option for larger organizations, but it's intended to recommend that every business who transports dangerous goods, and that applies to consigners, it applies to loaders, and it applies to transport companies themselves, to have some sort of expertise on staff, somebody who's an initial point of contact. You'll never answer all the questions. However, we want to be able to encourage businesses to have somebody a go-to person. I'd expect that a lot of businesses have somebody who's kind of like that at the moment, but we want to sort of formalize it and try and provide a bit more impetus for why that is an important role. Consigners. Consigners and carriers are generally going to have the same duties as now. That's not going to change. And ultimately, compliance with the code is going to be a general requirement for the transport of dangerous goods. But one of the things that we hope that comes from the new code is more effective action by consigners to meet their duties in the situations where they're the ones who are best placed to do so. So probably the best example there is that the consigners are the ones who own and know their products, or at least they should. They should not be relying on the transport company who they engage to determine what the appropriate controls are. They should be determining from their list of dangerous goods what the controls are and informing the transport company about that. So we're hoping that this will shift the balance in that relationship in order to require the person with the expertise to provide the information to the person who has to implement it. And as Debra mentioned, Class 1 explosives transport is coming into the code. So the Australian Explosives Code has not been updated since 2009. It doesn't have a maintainer at present, and it was unlikely to find one. So a recommendation was made that the explosives code be brought into the ADG code. It's found in the International Dangerous Goods Code, so it was a reasonable decision to make. And for anyone who's interested in that, anyone who does engage in Class 1 transport, we are about to commence a separate consultation specifically targeted at that type of transport, because we're aware that that is a much more bespoke field, and also that there are some discrete issues that we need to address there. So what are the next steps and some indicative timelines for this review? So between now and December 2024, now being sometime today, the C-RIAs, the Consultation Regulatory Impact Statement, and more importantly than that, the full draft of the new code is going to be released for review, and we are seeking input on all of those on what we've done to date. In early 2025, we will consolidate all of the all of the input we receive from regulators, from industry, from interested members of the public, and begin to compile that code into a finalized document. And at the same time, we'll be working on beginning legislative drafting for the new code as well. So the new code will be accompanied by new legislation. Midway through next year, we intend to seek approval for the new code from infrastructure and transport ministers, with a view to publishing the approved code and the model regulations, the new model regulations, in late 2025, with a view for the new code to commence from 1 October 2026. That would be when what would have been ADG 7.10 would commence. So the same 2-year timeline is being retained. So what do we need from you? As Debra said, we need to hear from everybody. It's not just the people who regulate, it's the people who are actually impacted by these changes. So we want to hear information. If you've got data on the benefits that we're proposing, the costs of the changes that we're proposing, and any impacts from the changes, we are interested to hear that. Any data that we receive will be de-identified and aggregated. But the important thing here is that the advice that we receive from industry helps us to make the case for making the right changes. We want to make sure that whatever changes we make, that the code works as well as it can for everybody. We want to hear from everyone on that front. That includes the transporters. We are going to hear from regulators, I can assure you of that. And we need to make sure that it works for all of us, for transporters, regulators, and maintainers. And a note on that, when you are going through this, and even if there's only one issue that you're deeply passionate about, or that you think we've got wrong, or something along those lines, please do so. Every little bit helps. And our webpage will include a form to help you prepare a submission. What I'll do when I provide this presentation to Michelle, I'll include the links to that. Unfortunately, they're not live at this time. One of the things that we are aware of is that there are likely, in fact, we know that there are errors or omissions in the draft code. It's a compilation of the nine various parts of the code that we've been working on for the last couple of years. The code is a complex beast. And while we're aware of some errors, there may be more hiding that we've missed. So if you come across something that looks wrong, there's a real chance that it's actually just an error. And please let us know about that. We'll have prepared a separate form for those kinds of errors, so that way we can easily aggregate those errors together separate to more detailed consultation. And then after that, we have to work to consolidate everything together, put it through our quality checks, and then we will be seeking approval for the new code. So this is a big update. We're aware of that. Having been working on it for the last couple of years, I think Debra and I feel it even more than most, but like I said, the look and feel is going to remain mostly the same, but this is still a big change, especially with where to find things. People who have become comfortable with knowing where to find things in the code may bump into some challenges. But one of the things that we're doing is we are making sure that we provide clear guidance material addressed at both industry and regulators. One of the key documents that we'll be producing as part of this is a guide for businesses who transport dangerous goods. That's whether you're a consignor or a carrier. It's one of the things that we don't really have at present, sort of DG 101 kind of, what's the basic shape of dangerous goods transport? Where do I find this kind of information? It won't tell you everything you need to know, but it will tell you where to find the information you need to know. And there is still some work to come. I wish that we could deal with everything in one go, but that's not the world we live in. So the C-RIA, when you read it, you'll note that there are some areas that we're still considering and we're still working on. The question of regulating diesel as dangerous goods is a fraught one. It's always a challenging one. for anyone who's concerned about that, I will be clear that we are not proposing to regulate diesel the same as petrol. That is not that's not what we're looking to achieve with this. It's a question of what is the appropriate level of regulation for diesel under the dangerous goods framework. The current exemption that is absolute needs to be reconsidered. Transitional provisions for the new code. We want to make sure that as we move from the existing world of ADG 7 into the new world of the new code, that we provide clear transitional provisions. We've put together a set of principles for that are set out in the C-RIAs. Essentially, it is that if the equipment that you're using is still safe and effective to use, especially if it's something like a vehicle that lives for a very long time, that it continues to be allowed to be used, and making it clear. Licensing for dangerous goods drivers. There's a lot to be done there. It's something that will take some time. And there's some other areas that we are working on in future NTC programs. So questions around what training requirements there are for both for drivers who require licensing, but also for other people involved in transport, unlicensed drivers, forklift drivers, loaders, consigners, those sorts of questions. Administrative arrangements around approvals, which is always a complicated topic, especially if you're involved in the tanker game, and additional harmonization of guidance materials. So working to try and provide clearer guidance materials for everyone involved in transport. And that is the end of the presentation. And we'd be interested to hear if there's any questions.
Just before we start on questions, sorry, Michelle and Matt, I just want to reiterate. Matt said, we've both said we need data from you. We need your thoughts and ideas. You don't need to answer every question, but please, if you see something in the draft code that you think, yes, about time, that's good, please don't assume that it will get up. We need you to actually tell us that you think it's good. If you've got data to support why it should be done, please tell us, because if you don't, and we have others who say it's not, we don't get that balance. So please just go through. You're not expected to provide information for every question, but the ones that matter to you, please let us know. Thanks, Michelle.
Thank you, Deborah and Matt. We just have one question. Where do I go for advice if I've never carted dangerous goods before and need to know where to start?
Matt?
that is a genuinely tricky question. That's the impetus for the guide for businesses who transport dangerous goods. We don't have that. We don't have that basic resource at the moment. It tends to be managed on an ad hoc basis. Whether it's somebody who contacts a competent authority or the National Transport Commission, our contact details are at the end. So we're welcome. I'm sure either Deborah or I would be happy to help out. But yes, we're aware that that's a challenging question to answer, and one that we want to try and work together with industry and regulators to hopefully make those questions more answerable in future.
And I'll just add on to that. Certainly, Matt and I are happy to take questions, and you can call us for some advice to steer you in the right direction. We are not consultants, but we can certainly steer you in the right direction. But if you've never carted dangerous goods before and you're thinking of getting into this full-time or expanding to it, you might also want to consider, do you need a consultant to help you set everything up? But certainly, call Matt or I. We will be happy to answer questions, steer you in the right direction. But as I said, if it gets to too much, we can't act as consultants for you.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. We don't have any other questions, but we will be making this available on the NatRed website, as I mentioned, and we'll be sending it to all members and encouraging them to send in any feedback. So thank you very much for making the time to talk to us today.
Michelle, we will give you, we had hoped to have it before the end of the webinar, but it hasn't come through yet. We will have a QR code that will actually take you to the web page that has the series, all of the questions and all of this information. So as soon as I get that QR code, we will email it to you so that you can add it either on the end of the video or with the video, so all of your members can use the QR code to get to the web page.
That sounds wonderful. Thank you so much. Well, thank you, everyone, and have a great day.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you.